Welcome to the 12th video on ancient Rome and part 2 of the Roman kings. Now, in the last video, we dealt with Romulus, and of course he was the first legendary king of Rome. And in this video, we're going to go over the second, third, and fourth kings of Rome. Now, in the last video, we talked about how Romulus jointly ruled with a Sabine king called Tatius, and you will remember that he was assassinated. And so he only jointly ruled with Romulus for about 5 years. Now, after Romulus disappeared, there was pressure by the Sabines who were in Rome at this time to appoint a new Sabine king, because they were a little bit unhappy with the fact that their king had only ruled for 5 years. Now, the Romans accepted this only on the condition that they could choose who would become king. And so they chose Numa, who again was a Sabine. Now, it's important to note that Numa was elected king by the Senate. It was not given to him on a hereditary basis. And we will see later on with the last king of Rome, this will become a source of discontent that will become a basis for the revolution and lead to the formation of the Republic. But we will talk about that in the next video. Now, we talked about before how Romulus was associated with violence. You will remember he assassinated his brother and also abducted the Sabine women. And so Numa was quite different than Romulus. He is associated with law and order, and he also established the Roman religion. And so he is seen as the ancient lawgiver of Rome, very similar to the role Solon played in Athens. Now, one thing to point out is that Rome was very divided early on along tribal lines. And so in order to unify these tribes, Numa saw it as his goal to bring culture and civilization to Rome. And this, he hoped, would unite Rome, because in order to conquer the world, Rome would first itself have to be united, or they would go nowhere very fast. Now, one of the things that Numa did was he moved the order of the Vestal Virgins from Alba Longa to Rome. Now, the Vestal Virgins were 6 virgins that served the god Vesta, and they lived in the sanctuary dedicated to the goddess. Now, during the day, anybody could go there who wished to do so, but during the night, all men, for obvious reasons, were banned from staying there at night. And so again, it was this order that Numa moved to Rome. So you can see this connection to religion that Numa has. Now, the other religious act that he did was he created a cult for the god Terminus. Now, Terminus was the god of borders. And so he controlled all borders between cities and even large regions, and even eventually the empire itself. And this will become very important later on. We'll see emperors like Hadrian consult with the god Terminus to decide whether he should expand or halt the expansion of the Roman Empire. Now, it was said that Numa received divine assistance from the gods, and he accomplished this through a romance that he had with a nymph. And this nymph would pass Numa advice directly from the gods on how to govern Rome. And so this benefited Numa greatly because he had the favor of the gods, probably more than any other Roman king. He also established the office of the Pontifex Maximus, which was the most important religious office in Rome, and that will be the case going forward all the way up through imperial times. Another thing Numa did was create a 12-month calendar. So you can see that the Romans are trying to create order in this chaotic world. It's almost like, let's get this right and create a correct 12-month calendar so we know what the correct day, month, and year is. Okay, so let's move on to the third legendary king of Rome, Tullus Hostilius. Now, if Numa was associated with peace and wisdom, Tullus was associated with honor and war. And of course, those are 2 characteristics that Romans prized above all. And it was a good thing that Tullus was a man of war, because unlike Numa's reign, he was constantly in a state of battle. Now, one of the first problems that arose was that city that was close to Rome called Alba Longa. Now, both cities decided rather than going through some terrible war, they decided to pick their best 3 warriors and then have them settle who would become master of the other city. And so these 6 warriors would have it out, and that would decide the fate of Rome. And actually, Rome chose 3 brothers. And as you can see in that painting to the right, they are receiving their 3 swords to go out and fight the warriors of Alba Longa. And of course, the Romans win, right? They couldn't lose because that would be the end of Rome. But 5 of the warriors die in combat, and only 1 survives. And of course, he is a Roman. And so now Alba Longa is under Rome's dominion. Now, eventually, Alba Longa broke away again, and Tullus was forced to go straighten them out, and bring them back under Roman rule. And this was the formation of the Latin League. Now, Tullus was actually quite generous with the people of Alba Longa. He didn't kill them, he absorbed them into Rome. So all of the people became Roman citizens. And this is a policy that we will see going forward. Rome would rather absorb cities than destroy them. Now, Tullus was involved in numerous wars against the surrounding tribes, and he defeated many of these cities through his skills as a strong military leader. And as a result of all these conquests, he nearly doubled the population of Rome. Now, one thing that Tullus is associated with is building the first Senate house, and of course it bears his name. Now, later in life, Tullus decided to become religious. Now, he was not as religious as Numa, but he decided to give it a try. Well, according to legend, he botched a religious rite, and as a result, Jupiter struck him down by lightning. And so that ended his reign of 31 years, and paved the way for a new king, and that was Ancus, who was the legendary 4th king of Rome. Now, we know the least about Ancus, but we do have some tidbits. First, he was the grandson of Numa, and so like Numa, he was also a Sabine. Now, Tullus had been a Roman, but by this time in Roman history, the distinction between Romans and Sabines was becoming less and less clear, and they were pretty much all Romans. So the fact that he was a Sabine was not quite as important as it had been under Romulus and Numa. Now, Ancus, like his grandfather Numa, was also religious, but he also faced some difficulties. Specifically, the Latins were attacking Rome, so he was able to defeat them, and similar to Tullus, he absorbed them under the rule of Rome. Now, one thing Ancus was able to do was he was able to extend Roman territory to the sea and give Rome its first saltwater port, which was Ostia. He also is credited with building the first bridge over the river Tiber. Ancus was considered a good king in many respects, and another thing he is credited with is bringing water to Rome via those very, very famous aqueducts. And so there are several later aqueducts that are named after him. So I kind of like to think of Ancus as a hybrid between Numa and Tullus. He reigned over a period which saw some peace, but also some war. Now, during his reign, we will see the Etruscans, who are the northern neighbors of Rome, become more and more powerful. The Etruscans reached the pinnacle of their power, and so they had a huge influence on Rome. And we will start to see Etruscan leaders make their way into Roman politics. And so the next king will be Etruscan, and we will get to that in the next video.